Hey everybody, hope you had a good Labor Day weekend. I know things have been crazy at Rutgers over the last week or so with flooding. I hope you guys are all safe. Really kind of amazing to me that all this has been going on. And it's it's just, actually I was supposed to have my first in-person class. So that's not going forward in digital media, and it was actually delayed because of what happened. Um, so anyway, again, I hope you guys are safe. Hope you guys are in your dorms or wherever, or commuting, whatever, you're doing okay. And anyway, so I guess the good thing about this class is that we do have it online, even though I would prefer to be in class, but here we are. So anyway, this is actually like obviously I'll be able to say that a lot of the semester, because this is where we really start to teach you how to write. Okay. And today was actually the day, deadline day I gave you for, the I guess you could say the third person profile of yourself. Okay. All right. So I'm sorry, today, not today, because you're actually going to see this on Tuesday. I'm taping this on Monday. So anyway, so I look forward to looking at those. Again, the idea here is, that was really just supposed to be practice, just, and also kind of, again, that assignment was to give me an idea like where you're at, and it kind of helps me, teach what I need to teach. Okay, so, and also kind of address you at the appropriate level. So, all right. So also added some reading that was also assigned. I actually assigned you guys chapters 1 and 2. So why don't we do that first? Look through that first. Okay. Screen. All right. And I have it actually online here, right here. It's actually some broad sweeping issues that these first 2 chapters address. They don't really get into the nitty gritty of how to write things or anything like that. But we'll just scan through anyway. The first chapter really just kind of like essentially defines what we're doing right now in terms of journalism, especially the fact that it's digital journalism. It talks about like things like the libel suit, it says there, which is really not something, we'll get into that later in the semester, but it's not something that it's not as big of a deal as people make it out to be. So just the idea here is that you really should, I actually have 3 tenets, I would say, of what I look for in terms of a good news story. Okay. And just give me a second here. Go. And those 3 tenets are this: being accurate. Okay. Accuracy. Okay. There's no probably more important thing. I mean, we see this all the time right now, all this talk about fake news and all this stuff. And yes, there is actually a declining declining trust in the actual news media and what the information it produces. There's a lot more opinion involved in, I would say, in what is supposed to be objective, straight journalism. I mean, you see it now. I mean, the 24/7 news media has actually kind of really changed things in terms of like, I would say, providing, being kind of shaping the news, I would say. At nighttime, you probably would like kind of think like you want to probably have some sort of like news that actually is pretty straight and would tell you like what's going on, whether it's Afghanistan or coronavirus or whatever, but what you get essentially is a lot of opinion hosts, so people, I think, get confused by that, and they kind of treat that as though it's like straight news when it's not. All right, so accuracy can be something that's not just what's right or wrong, but what's essentially how it's presented in terms of context. Okay. Context, is it the right context? Is it an accurate context? Okay. Is it framed appropriately? Is it objective? Okay. All right. Basically, reporters are humans too, so they can't be exactly perfect in that regard, but you want to get as close to objective as possible. And in fact, Bob Woodward, famous journalist from the Watergate era, who's written a number of books, he's also been a controversial journalist, but he actually did say something that was actually really relevant to what you really need to know, and that is that journalists need to seek the most obtainable version of the truth. Okay, what does that mean? Well, that means that basically you can't always get to the exact truth, but you try to get to the closest version of it as possible. Okay, you can't always be in the room when things are decided, or like what Joe Biden was doing when he decided, how to get out of Afghanistan. You don't know exactly like what happened there. We can only like really speculate, but it's a reporter's job to try to get as close to that truth as possible. Okay, whether that could have been handled better, whatever. All right. My other tenet, other two tenets are clarity. Okay. All right. Now again, that's can also be about accuracy and context, that sort of thing, but just basically writing in a way that everybody can understand. And as I discussed in the last week's video, writing in a level that like anybody of all walks of life, intelligence levels or whatever can understand. Okay. Focus is something that probably is a little bit more advanced than the other two, but it's basically trying to make sure that you are staying on the right path and staying straight and staying on topic. Okay. Too often there are stories that where there's I'll especially in the early going of this class, I'll have like stories that basically you'll be interviewing, like actually for your first time, it's going to be a profile on somebody, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But where like somebody will maybe present like a whole bunch of interesting things about themselves, but we're not writing biographies here. We're not writing like encyclopedia entries here. We're trying to write stories that are new and unique, and that really requires staying on the same topic. You're not just writing a story on a person. You're writing about whatever it is about that person that's interesting. Okay, and you have to basically stay on that topic from top to bottom. Actually, Steve Miller, maybe some of you know him. I'm not sure. This is actually like this should be like one string here, but he has something that's called the string theory. Okay, and that means basically staying straight from top to bottom on one string on one topic. What happens is actually when you start to add in all different topics that aren't relevant, and you get like tangled up, a tangled up mess. Okay, that's hard to detangle. Okay, and hard to follow. And also, what happens is when you have like a story that goes in all different directions, all different topics introduced, and it's not specific and unique. You're also you're also not providing the kind of depth that you need to provide. If you're just staying on one topic and provide more depth, more detail on that one particular topic. Okay. All right. So let's go back to the book. Okay, just scanning through here. I know this is this goes through with me every semester. It just tends to go really slow, and maybe it's my internet. I'm not sure. Okay. All right. Yeah, like I said, it goes more about libel suits, things like that here. Anyway, avoiding libel suits. Well, again, the idea there is to really just, again, just the main important thing is actually being accurate, okay, more than anything else, okay. News stories are really about providing answers to questions, okay. That's essentially like what a news story does, essentially. It's actually, you can almost write a news story based on like, if you actually like put together an outline. Like one way I've handled in the past actually is to actually almost like write out a list of questions that we would use in your interviews. Okay. One of the things that chapter 2 talks about is, I'm getting there. And by the way, one important thing is, somebody asked me this question. I'm having you read these chapters in the book. I'm not having you guys actually something. I'm actually like, oh my God, I'm actually in the wrong area. I apologize for that. Oh my God. Let me just make sure I got to the right thing here. Today. Okay. So we talked about that. Okay. Let me just get to chapter 2. And then basically the idea here is that what this chapter talks about, selecting and reporting the news. Okay. It talks about essentially trying to find the right things that you need to really focus on so you can actually have a story that's specific and focused. And some of the things they tell you to look for in terms of like when you're if you're doing like a profile on somebody, again, you're not writing some broad encyclopedia entry or anything like that. You're writing a story that actually again hones on something specific. So what chapter 2 talks about, it gives you essentially things to look for, okay, in terms of like what's unique about this particular topic, like I said, of a profile of a person. So you're looking for things like timeliness, okay? So basically, again, that's what's new. Well, you want to look for, do a story that basically is as information as recent as possible. Oftentimes when I've had stories about, we've done stories on people and that sort of thing, it will actually, you know, be a little bit too much about things like, you know, stuff that happened like 10 years ago or something like that. And that can be a good story theme and a good story topic. But what you want to do is you want to actually, you know, what's happened since then, right? So you want to actually talk about, you know, if it's something that's like major that happened in their lives, like a major move, like maybe they moved from another country, or maybe there was something tragic that happened in their lives, you could certainly focus on that. But what is going on right now? What, you know, what happened in those past 10 years that actually, you know, maybe that tragic event or whatever it is that shaped their lives in some ways, maybe negative or positive, hopefully positive, you know? So you want to focus on is like, okay, yes, you can focus on that event that happened 10 years ago, but how is that shaping them now? How does that impact them now? Okay. You want to really like focus on maybe things that have happened in maybe like in the past, I would say year or something like that. It really mainly, but I said if it's something that's actually like really big and huge, it happened like 10 years ago, you could just have to update it to now. Okay. Proximity is something important. I'm not necessarily looking for that in this class because you guys are from all over the place and everything. Yes, I do get a majority of people from New Jersey, but you know, things that happen actually in your area, that sort of thing, that's actually like you know, that's obviously, you know, important and relevant. If you're writing about, you know, one thing you could write about, you're writing about an individual, a person or something, for which would be doing for their first assignment, maybe one of the things you could look at is like how they made out and how they managed to get through this whole flood, you know, and how they dealt with that first issue. The first week of class, first in-person classes in Rutgers in a year and a half, and we were flooded. You know, so that would be something that has proximity, some locality, some localness to it. Okay. You know, something that affected us all in this area and everything in central New Jersey. Okay. You know, then there's other things to look for, like in terms of like conflict. Yeah, I mean, obviously you do want to look for things that maybe be causing like, you know, some issues, some controversy. I mean, obviously those are things that are important. I don't like to necessarily emphasize that because it's not always, I'm not always like the guy, oh, it's always, if it bleeds, it leads. Because if you have a story that's inspirational or whatever, is actually like can really promote somebody, that's important too. Okay. Okay. So like I said, this is all stuff that's actually kind of outlined in chapter 2. All right. Yes, this is actually what I was looking for. A hot tip. So when you actually try to find, so like I said, the first story you're going to do is actually, what you're going to do is you're going to actually pick somebody, anybody you know. What I typically do in this class in the past, I typically taught it in person. Well, this is my third semester in a row where I'm not teaching it in person. So, you know, but when I've taught it in person in the past, like one way for me to actually get this class going is to have you interview somebody in class. Well, that's not always easy right now. So, so because we're all just kind of like this amorphous floating class out there that, you know, who knows, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, who knows if you know each other or not, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going to ask you guys, and actually, you know what, let's go to that assignment right now. I haven't actually published it yet, but, and by the way, don't forget, in order to like, good way to like keep track of what's going on in this class is not just obviously pay attention to what's in the assignment list, but also I have overall themes that are here in the modules. Okay. But let's go to the assignments first. Okay. This is actually something, again, I'm going to have this published by 9 a.m. on, it's not published right now. This is the teacher's view. This is going to be due in actually a little less than 2 weeks. It's going to be due on September 20th. but your first assignment is going to be, this is actually going to be your first graded assignment, I should say. Okay. Please interview somebody you know, can be a family member. I don't care. I know there's like certain rules that some hangups that professors have and everything about who you interview and stuff, but you know, just know that, like, you know, I'm pretty liberal in terms of, with a small L here, in terms of who you interview for stories, stuff like that, because I know that a lot of kind of like stuck, you know, maybe not able to talk to people because of the limitations on that and stuff. So maybe you're afraid to talk to people because you're afraid of getting the virus or whatever. I totally understand that. Maybe you're not, but I would like you to interview somebody you know. Also, you're not in a classroom, so maybe you can interview your roommate or something like that, or you can interview, you know, like I said, it could be a family member or something. Okay, I mean, it's something you probably wouldn't typically do in journalism, but I'm just, for the sake of this class, it's a beginning writers class. I'd like you to actually just, you know, give you a wide net, okay, to fall in. All right, so I'm going to ask you to write 500, 800 words. Be similar to this the first assignment we just did, only this actually will be a real reporting assignment, okay? And it will be graded, okay? 500, 800 words, and focus on what's unique about this person, what's new, okay? Please refer to this video lecture and the reading assignments for guidance. Please write in a news format, which we'll get to in a bit. But first, before I get to that, okay, let's go back to the actual reading. So once you actually pick whatever is unique about that person, so that's something you, and we'll talk more about like the whole interviewing process, but in depth, but just as a way to start that process here, I mean, really the most important aspect of this is not necessarily the writing part of it, it's the interviewing part, okay? So what you want to do is you want to focus on these questions, what they call the W's, okay? You can say there's 5 W's or 6 W's, one of them is an H, but it's who, what, where, how, why, when. So what you want to do is you want to actually interview somebody, you want to keep these questions in mind when you actually do the interviewing, okay, no matter who it is. And, you know, yeah, it would be great if you actually had an idea before the interview even started, actually, I should say, what the topic's going to be, what makes that person unique, but you don't, but probably 9 times out of 10, you don't, okay? Now you're going to be interviewing people you know, so you might actually, maybe it's more like 7 times out of 10 in this case. You might have an idea what makes that person unique. I don't know, but you know, you might not know right away like what makes that person unique. It might be certain things that you just don't know about that person. Maybe you knew them all your lives, and you just, maybe they'll bring up something that you just never knew. My father was interesting. My father actually told me something like a few years ago, and he's like almost 86 years old right now. He told me something I never knew about him, and that was, I mean, this isn't necessarily a unique quality about him, but he told me that he once got arrested in a bar in Manasquan, New Jersey in like 1956 because he was involved in a fight. Tried to be a misdemeanor charge, but if you ever knew this guy, he's like totally straight-laced guy. You know, you would never think, he's straight as an arrow. You never think he would get involved in any trouble, but he did. So, you know, sometimes you just learn things you just never know. And that's what comes out of this questioning process, okay? Who, what, where, why, who, what, where, sorry, who, what, when, where, why, how, okay? And this goes to some of the things we just discussed that were brought up in these 2 chapters of things to look for. Where obviously is like, you know, you want to actually kind of like maybe look at things that maybe have happened in your particular coverage area, okay? This is obviously, you know, which isn't necessarily relevant to this assignment because, again, you guys from like all over the place or something, okay? So maybe for later assignments that we do about Rutgers or something like that, yeah, that's fine. But, you know, this is a lot about the who, okay? Who is involved, who cares? I mean, you want to write about a story. It's not just about the who you're writing about, but you also want to write about, you know, you want to write for your audience, and you want to write about who cares about this person, who would care about this, why would you care about this person? Is there something about this person that's inspirational? I mentioned my father, you know, actually the guy's been going through a lot, you know, this past year. I mean, he's been in and out of the hospital. He just actually survived COVID. So, you know, there's actually like, you know, there's probably like, you have a story about somebody who actually has actually been through COVID or something. That's actually a question that's actually a story topic that would satisfy the who cares question. Why would I care? Because that's been such an issue for everybody for the last year and a half. And I think that anytime you have a story, especially a story about an 85, 86-year-old man who survived COVID and never went to the hospital because he was double vaccinated. Sorry, I have to add my political speech there, I guess. I think that's actually a story that could be inspirational for anybody. So, then also the what happened. Okay. Again, we're trying to find something that has about that person that's like a unique quality. So what were the consequences? What did the person do? What did the person do? Maybe even as a lifestyle that's maybe interesting, unique, that sort of thing. Okay. I think I mentioned my class or mentioned the lecture last week. You could put a low bar on that. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's been through COVID, but even stories like, think of your audiences as the Rutgers audience. Okay. Again, that would be the audience you want to cater to. So you want to maybe look for topics, because I'm thinking that you guys might want to like interview maybe students. Maybe that's like the easiest thing for you to interview right now for students. Pick a student as a profile. So, you might want to look for things that actually like would be interesting to other students, and one of the things that it's always been interesting to me is with rising tuition, that sort of thing, is how do students cope with this? How do they, cope with like, many of them are probably unemployed this past year because of the issue with COVID and everything. How are they getting by now? And obviously, again, students dealing with this whole COVID situation, the restrictions that are still in place, stuff like that. That's also another story that could be important for other people. Is it unique? Not necessarily, but maybe that person's unique set of circumstances. The person has a unique set of circumstances in dealing with COVID. That's obviously unique to other people. It's not just a matter of them like, they're like everybody else where they have to wear a mask and whatever. But maybe like I said, maybe they've actually had COVID and they've had, they really struggled with it or something, and that makes their situation more unique. Maybe, like I said, maybe they've lost their job and had COVID or something. Maybe they've had to deal with a sick relative or something like that. Those are things that make their set of circumstances more unique than other people. Okay. We talked about when, obviously, we talked about where, we talked about why those are important, why and how. We want to ask those questions. Those are usually the next step questions, because you want it once you find out maybe that person's unique set of circumstances in their life that makes it unique. You want to find out like why or how did they overcome those obstacles they might have dealt with? How do they deal with the everyday life they have to deal with? Why is it unique? Okay, obviously, again, it's not just a matter of, but again, if it's a person who's actually going through the whole COVID restriction thing and everything else, you want to say, well, what about their situation? Why is it unique to other people? Again, like maybe they've had to go through like certain hurdles and consequences themselves that others haven't had to go through or something. Okay. All right. This chapter talks about things like the concept of objectivity. News stories must be objective or free for any reporter bias opinion. I've talked about that a little bit. If an issue is controversial, the interview all sides involved. In this right now, we'll be dealing with that issue like more as semester goes along. I'm only really asking for this particular first story is like just interviewing one person. Okay. But we'll get more into, right. Like I said, the first half of the semester deals more with things like more of our writing end of things, and I'm making sure they're up to speed on that. Okay. The thing about accuracy is interesting. We mentioned a little bit about like things like the word about libel suits and everything, but those aren't really that common in in journalism. Actually, what's more common actually is lack of credibility. And I talked again a bit about the lack of trust, that's out there. And I think that's actually bigger than anything because, in order to really kind of like get people to actually read us and to keep reading us, because it is actually a commercial industry. Okay. We have to get them. There's probably no better marketable tool for a journalist than it is to get the audience to trust us. Okay. So, all right. So that's actually the first two chapters here. Okay. Now, so I'm kind of giving you, that's basically like an overall about like essentially what to look for in terms of your assignment, the approach you need to take, that sort of thing. Okay. An overall approach. And that is basically the overall approach in trying to find out, the unique quality, what you need to find in terms of like story topic and and basically trying to find out what's unique about that particular person. Okay. All right. And again, like, with the overall broad sweeping goals of like trying to be as accurate as possible, as clear as possible, as focused as possible. Okay. What I've discussed so far, I would say largely deals with focus, because I talked about the importance of finding a story topic. And then once you actually go through that story topic, answering the questions who, what, where, why, when, okay? That keeps you focused on the topic, okay? Talked about the importance of being accurate, okay? Now let me talk a little bit about this, clarity, okay? And this is where you really need to understand the style of journalism. And I mean, this is something we're going to be talking about probably for weeks, but the news writing style, again, is unique, okay, in itself, use that term again, and that it's really different from what you're used to. It's different from how I, again, the stories you've written in the past, the expository writing stories, the essay writing, where it's like how I spent my summer vacation, okay, where you have something along the lines of, a text, or sorry, you have like something like a topic statement, okay, and then you have like essentially a body, and then you have a conclusion, okay. It's not so much like that in journalism, and as I mentioned in my previous lecture, it's actually more of like a news story is almost like an upside down story again, okay. So you might have something that's similar to a topic statement and a body, but you don't have a conclusion, okay. And that's because, again, most people only read the first graph of a news story, in case you were wondering, okay? That's all they read, usually, is the first graph of a news story. Think about it as a tweet, okay? The first paragraph of a news story essentially is typically almost like a tweet. And this is actually something I talk a lot about in journalism, or I should say in my digital media class, okay? But this is, you can't see because it's really shiny, but you get these alerts on your phone, maybe, okay, from like different news organizations, or maybe you get it from Facebook or something. That's all people usually read, is that first thing, okay? You might have like this, you might think I have this beautiful prose. You really ideally want to get people to read the whole damn story, okay? But you might have, you think it's this beautiful prose, and of course people are going to read this whole thing, and yes, I'm speaking in British, whatever. But and then you come up with this wonderful conclusion. Yes, and now it's time to conclude. But the thing is that the reason why we don't have conclusions is most people don't get down to the conclusion. It's news. They want to read about what's new. Okay, they want to. It's actually very much resembles essentially a gossip conversation where essentially first question, like let's say, okay, I know this is kind of corny, but first question, it might be like one of the typical topics that people want to know about when you're like dealing, especially like younger people or something like that. They want to know about like relationships, people who are dating who, or whatever, if you want to call it that, So people who broke up with people. So if you have a situation where you learn that somebody broke up with somebody, right? That's like the first thing you want to know is who broke up with whom, right? And then notice, by the way, we're going to the who, what, where, whys, okay? And probably one of the first questions you want to know is why, okay? So the first thing you want to know is what happened, what happened? You don't want to like wait for the last paragraph to know what happened. You want to know what happened in the first paragraph, okay? And of course you want to know why. Who's to blame? That sort of thing, okay? So you want to go step by step in this process. And then what happens is you have essentially what they call the inverted pyramid, which I'll get into in the next lecture, okay? But basically the idea is that you want to have essentially what essentially is an upside is essentially is like what they call, I mean, I'm gonna get a little bit of this right now, but you want to have essentially an upside down triangle essentially as a format, okay? All right. Yes, I'm gonna do this corny thing. Oh, wow. That's interesting. It's not working. Anyway, let's go to, what? Let's just do this, okay? All right. Perfect. That's not- Sorry, should have been a little bit more prepared from this, but I actually feel like sometimes I actually kind of teach a little bit on the fly, and I feel like it's actually important to basically tell people a little bit about something, because actually there's actually ahead of time, because there's actually and then to actually reinforce it as the time goes along, because there's actually like repetition is actually really important in journalism, just kind of reinforcing ideas. But the most worthy info, if you can really see that, I know it's not really big. Most worthy info. See, it's actually like it's actually upside down triangle, and then the fat part is basically what your most important newsworthy info is, should be stored, or essentially be. Okay. Yes, and you want to try to answer all the who, what, where, how, what, why, when questions right away, but you can't necessarily. So you basically have to, answer them as you go along. Okay. All right. So we try to answer as many as possible in the first question. And like if it's somebody breaking up with somebody, you probably want to know what happened. That's why the first question you want to have answered. Okay. So you want to like get that out right away. Okay. Then you go into some of the important details. But what happens is you go into that whole question, you start asking questions, who, what, where, and then you try to, things like how or whatever might be like, in terms of like the ending of a relationship, might be the lesser of an important question than like what happened or something. So you go down into the story. As you go down the story, you get into the less important details. Okay. All right. So that's what you want to focus on as you go into the story. You want to focus on the most important details first, and you want to go down as you go down the story. It's essentially declining importance in details. I like to tell people that don't necessarily think of it in terms of like, maybe sometimes the details are all equally important. Okay. So it's not always like the lesser important details, but that is actually what you want to strive for, essentially, is your most important details first, and then the declining order of details. But usually there is the most important detail is usually the answers to this question. Okay. What is this story about? Or this question, what happened? And then basically getting into why do I care? Okay. Those are usually your very first important questions to answer in the story. Okay. All right. So anyway, so the problem with now, this actually is part of also this lecture goes a little bit of the history lesson. Like, how did we get here in terms of journalism? Why is it the structure the way it is? Why don't we write stories with conclusions? Why don't we write stories with, with that kind of essay style or something? Well, it's interesting because actually, with the way news was written the very early on, it actually was kind of written in that kind of that kind of essay style. And there wasn't really a lot of like, there wasn't a lot of emphasis placed on that, on the importance of being succinct and exact and simplistic. Okay. So many news stories actually now are actually like, I guess I described this a little bit last week, but they're also like each paragraph is usually no more than a sentence or two. Okay. Because again, it's supposed to kind of resemble a conversation. You're supposed to actually give people a chance to pause, go one detail at a time and pause and move on. Okay. A long time ago, before television, before digital, before internet and everything, it was news writing actually was either written for what they considered the elite, or was written in a way where people just didn't really care how it really came out. Okay. And I mean, here's an example right here, the Titanic. Okay. I always show this story because I think this is like one of the worst stories ever written. Okay. This is from 1912, April 15th. And as you can see, like here we have one of the biggest events in the history of time, and look at the way they started this story. I mean, now look, with all due respect to what was going on at the time, they were probably taking the information over Morse code. So they were probably just taking it off Morse code and slapping it down and whatever they were just using to process the story. Okay. But you can see that there's not a lot of emphasis on like trying to get the information to people as quickly as possible. Okay. So let's see how they started. This is, brace yourselves here, okay? The White Star Liner Olympic reports by wireless this evening that the Cunarder Compartha reached at daybreak this morning, the position from which wireless calls for help. So, I mean, you can see, even if I, that's actually one thing I should tell you that I'll be talking about this semester, is that there's probably like one of the best ways to actually get clarity in your story is actually sometimes to know that you're writing in a way that actually is clear and focused, is to actually read them out loud. And if you read them out loud and you actually find yourself stumbling over them because it doesn't resemble a conversation, then you're probably like not doing the right thing. Okay. As you can see right here, I'm having a hard time getting through this story because it's just written in a haphazard way. It's written in an unclear way. The sentence is way too long. Okay. It's a run-on sentence. Okay. And we're not getting to the point. The point is that the Titanic sunk and people perished and died. Okay. So the Carpathia found only the lifeboats and the wreckage of what had been the biggest steamship afloat. And it's almost like written in a way where I have to like change accents, right? But anyway, the Titanic has floundered at about 2:20 a.m. in latitude 4. It's like, just like I said, this is probably just like Morse code. This is about 30 minutes of latitude, or about 34 miles due south of the position of which it struck the iceberg. All her boats are accounted for. Most of the latter, presumably women and children. Blah blah blah. The Leyland liner California is searching for the position of the disaster, while the Carpathia is returning to New York with the survivors. It could be possibly stated that it just keeps going on and on and on. But like there were, and then like I think right here is actually where you essentially get the information you need. By the way, when I said X, I meant accents before. I meant like the stuffy kind of elitist, kind of like Upper West Side accents, or something, like almost like a Robin Williams kind of thing. So it's almost like it's speaking down to people, all right. So anyway, anyway, basically says, there's just basically not really any kind of direct news here. Okay. It's basically, like I said, it's almost, it just kind of speaks down to people. Okay. What happened was, what really changed things was actually like television. Okay. Television, probably more than anything, really actually like gave print media a run for its money, where it basically told people that, look, here's the deal. Okay. You need to actually, write things in a way that's actually like gets to people the immediacy and as fast as possible. Okay. So, what it did was essentially was that it told people that, with the fact that television news media was actually delivering it to people in a way that actually was like, fast. And even, I mean, it's not fast now, television media, because what's fast now is internet. But when it was really first came around in the 50s, especially, it provided people news in a way that actually like delivered to them more directly and immediate. And actually what happened as a result is these print newspapers actually like couldn't find a niche. They were getting beaten at their own game. So what they had to do is essentially they had to change what they had to do essentially in order to compete with television. And they even have to do more so now that can essentially, be relevant in the digital age. Okay. And that's when they started to develop the style of immediacy and inverted pyramid. Okay. And so you can see by actually the time that the actual, moon landing came, and see, this is actually like, let's just say person or whatever, human walked on the moon, everything is so dated, but still in a way. But it was much more advanced than it was in 1912 when people landed on the moon in 1969. And by then they actually learned the importance of immediacy. Okay. And if you can see that right there, that it says men have landed and walked on the moon. Okay. Again, it should say humans, but it basically says that, like, is there really anything more that needs to be said? You see, the whole style is different, that it wasn't done in this stuffy approach that like took like 10 million miles to get to it. At the point, it basically just told you what you needed to know, okay, right away. And also, something, I mean, you could almost say like, well, why would you want to do that when the television's already doing it? Well, there's still like benefits to actually reading a news story that television and even what's provided by the internet can't provide. And that is that there's still depth to a story. What they needed to do is to provide a way to get people into the story right from the bat and tell them what they need to know as quickly as possible. And what the newsprint media can do still to this day is it can provide the kind of depth that others can't provide. And that's why it's still relevant. That's why it's still here. Okay. But you can see, like, that's all you really need in that first paragraph. There's men have landed, walked on the moon, humans, right? All right. So, and then, then the rest of the story, you can see that the story is much like, unlike the other one, it's actually the paragraphs, just by looking at it, you can see they're actually like very much like small. They're very like short and succinct. Okay, written in a way, again, that's almost like gossipy and conversational. Okay. Two Americans, astronauts of Apollo 11, steered their fragile four-legged lunar modules safely and smoothly to the historic landing yesterday at this time. Okay, that's it. Neil Armstrong, the 28-year-old civilian commander, radioed to Earth and the mission control room here. And then, look, that's the quote right here. Do you really, again, people at that point had never landed on the moon before. Do you really need to get into something that's long-winded or whatever? One of the worst things, one of the biggest enemies of journalists, by the way, are adjectives. And so once you start going to adjectives, if you had said something like, "You landed on the glorious landscape of blah, 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 of the moon, blah, blah," that's stuffy. That's ridiculous. It's repetitive. It's almost insulting people's intelligence. The main thing happened here is something that never happened before. That was unique. Somebody has actually landed on the freaking moon, right? All right. And then do you really need to say more of this quote right here? Houston Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Okay. Short, succinct paragraphs with spaces that give people a chance to like breathe. And another thing is, like I said, most people only read the first paragraph. So, in this case, they probably read a little more. Okay, obviously, but it gives them an out to actually where they don't necessarily have to read everything. They can just jump out of the story. Okay. And move on to maybe another story or something. Okay. All right. Anyway, so that's what we're shooting for here. If you actually look at the module here, if you look at it's actually in the module too. I actually have it described in the module where I actually show the differences between those two leads. Okay. All right. You need a refresher in that sense. Okay. And there you go. See, there it is right there. There's the story right there for the moon. And then you have essentially here, I hope this actually works still. Does this link still work? No, actually, no, it does. Very good. All right. Not forgotten. All right. Well, there it is again. Okay. And then there's the Titanic lead. Ew. Again, should be a link to that. And there is. Okay. All right. All right. There's actually I'll be getting into more of this as the semester goes along and everything, but this is actually the basic outline if you want to take a look at it, that I'll be talking more about next week. But right now, I just want to give you kind of a basic overall what the style and structure will look like, so you should try it, so you can achieve that accuracy, clarity, and focus goal as close as possible. But the first paragraph of a story typically is called a lead. Okay, as you see, it's actually this news jargon a little bit. We actually spell it a little differently in journalism, LEDE. And then essentially you want to look for something that actually transitions to your first point. Again, I'll get into this. I don't want to confuse people too much right now, but right now you just want to try to think of essentially a topic that basically identifies something unique about that person in the first story you're going to do. And then what you want to do is want to break it down. How do you get to your transitions, your anecdotes, and your quotes? Well, you answer the questions who, what, where, why, when, how. Okay. All right. So, and also don't forget that actually, so your next chapter is actually where we'll get into more of that depth. I want you guys to read by next week are chapters 7, 8, and 9. Okay. See, I have all the reading assignments actually already spelled out, which, we just go over the course of the semester. And again, I don't want you to do those writing exercises in the actual reading assignments. I just want you to read them. Okay. And I'll do tests on those things again. Okay. Just want you to read them. And the reflection of what you read, which is supplemental to what I talk about, will come out in your news assignments, your stories. Okay. there's something on, this is actually, again, this is the teacher's view of the assignments and everything, and also of Canvas. But this will be your first assignment. Okay. All right. Actually, again, I give a broad kind of sweeping perspective of what to look for here. Okay. So your assignment instructions are to please interview somebody you know, can be a family member. Again, please keep up to 500 and 800 words. Just kind of going over this again so you have it. Please, for the video lecture, which is this, guidance. Okay, and then your reading assignments for guidance. Please write in a news story format. Again, this is the kind of the overall before I get into the specific, and that is, what is this, lead, what is the story about? You have a paragraph, it's like 1 or 2 sentences. Again, what is the story about? More depth and details. Another paragraph, 1 or 2 sentences, same, why is it unique? Why is unique? The other outline I showed before is the next step to look for, okay, just so you don't get confused. This is the first outline, the overall general broad sweeping outline you need to have for a news story. Just kind of try to have a story that focuses on what's unique and why do we care, and basically answering those questions like what, who, what, where, how, why this is unique and why do we care, okay? All right. All right, so that's it, guys. And so this video will be published on Tuesday morning. And again, the future lecture videos will be published on Monday mornings by 9 a.m. We have Labor Day weekends. We have to do it differently. All right. And again, you'll see that there's assignments posted, that sort of thing. I'll be sending an email and also an announcement to reinforce, show you this lecture video, and also obviously to show you, talk about those assignments that are due. Okay. All right, guys, thanks very much. And I will be talking to you. Let me know if you need anything. Okay. You can email me or whatever. I also have my phone number if you want to text or whatever. Thanks very much. I'll be talking.